This is the most anticipated car of the year. I also feel like it may be the most anticipated car in the history of this show.
The lowly Corolla has now become the GR Corolla, and this is the car everyone wants. It's because it's so aspirational, it's so attainable.
300 horsepower, 273 pound-feet of torque, a 6-speed manual, all-wheel drive, hatchback. This is a recipe that just doesn't get made anymore.
And most of all, it has rally breeding. The cars that really brought us rally breeding and motorsports breeding are dead. The WRX STI, the Evo 10, even the Golf R, which we look forward to matching up against this one, didn't ever really have rally breeding.
The last one of those that existed was the Focus RS.
Yeah, this one has rally breeding too. You remember when Ford gave one of these to Ken Block? It was sort of fun at all costs. It still is. It's still a worthy aspirational car. The faster you drive this car, the tighter it gets, the more nimble it gets.
The Focus RS was kind of the last gasp of an era at Ford where they were making an enthusiast car at pretty much every price point. And this one came out in the $40,000 range and was only made for a couple of years. This is a 2017, right in the middle of the run. They made it 2016 to 2018 with this 2.3-liter engine, which was in the EcoBoost Mustang. Here it's making 350 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque, which makes it far more powerful than both the other cars here. And this one has had 3 owners, currently has over 100,000 miles, and still drives pretty great.
I remember when the Focus RS was the hot thing. Everyone wanted this car. And then Ford stopped building it. It went away. It died. And so we celebrated the next thing with motorsports breeding, the Veloster N.
We love the Veloster N. It's one of our very favorite modern hatchbacks, but it's dead too. Yep, Hyundai is killing the Veloster N and they're replacing it with this, essentially. It's the Kona N. The Kona is a small, compact CUV from Hyundai, and it now has the Veloster N drivetrain.
The good thing is, Hyundai is investing in the rally breeding and WRC breeding too, with pretty much everything they build. And this is it, the N version of the Kona. Let's not call them hatchbacks though, let's call them CUVs. Yeah, that's it, even though it pretty much looks like a tall hatchback. It is a hatchback.
It is true that what most manufacturers want to make right now is SUVs, because what most people want to buy right now is SUVs. There's a lot of manufacturers selling these hatchbacks slightly lifted, calling them CUVs, and finding sales success. I mean, the Subaru Crosstrek is one. The Mercedes GLA is another. Heck, the Porsche Macan is one. So here this is in a strange category of, is it a CUV, is it an SUV, is it a hatchback? I'll tell you, it's a hatchback on a lift kit.
Great cars, great roads, and all the reasons we love to drive.
TV, web, and podcast. This is Everyday Driver.
So into this market where CUVs are all that matter and nobody's buying an all-wheel drive hatchback anymore, Toyota decides to make an all-wheel drive hatchback.
But it's not just like any all-wheel drive. It's driver selectable. Yes, other cars have that too. I'm not even in sport mode yet. Let's go to sport mode. And then right down here, this dial just behind the gear shift lever, you can increase the torque to the back of the car. I can do a 60-40 split and then throw 70% of the torque to the rear.
You can change it to track mode, which is 50-50 split. Remember your STI? Going along those lines. The difference is subtle. It's there, but it's subtle. You don't feel like amazing difference in the way the car drives. It is quite similar to the way in the old STIs you could dial front to back a little bit. You could feel the difference, but it wasn't like it became a different car all of a sudden.
The Core starts at $35,900. The Circuit is $42,900, and then the Morizo edition goes all the way up to $49,000, almost 50 grand. There's also differences between these three flavors. The Core version has an open diff. Now, you can order the LSD front and rear on the Core version, your price goes up. You might say 300 horsepower, it's okay, it's not a lot. It's unbelievable amounts of power in this car. This car jumps, it moves. Gotta pass this logging truck if I can. Yes, I can.
You don't need to brake, sir, I got you. That shifter's good. It's really light. It's more along the economy car line than it is on like the new manual Supra, which is very exact and feels sports car. But this is precise and very easy to use, and it's satisfying to have a 6-speed in a little hatchback and just be like, I could use that. I could enjoy that. I am enjoying that. You can turn on intelligent manual transmission that will actually give you rev match. We have it off in this car right now. I enjoy a 6-speed. I like to heel toe. I wish I were better at it, but it is something that I thoroughly enjoy working on.
It's no shame to use this. It just makes you go faster. And Toyota has built these for track use. They took the GR Yaris engine and made it more powerful, and it's got triple pipes. At high RPMs, that center pipe pretty much just opens straight up to give it better breathing. That's what this car needed. It needed to breathe, it needed to run. The 3-cylinder is unique and cool. It gives it a unique little sound. And I love that since we, North Americans, didn't get the GR Yaris, we're getting this one.
This was really a high watermark in hot hatchbacks in many ways. Certainly a high watermark for Ford hatchbacks. The RS had never been sold in America before, and this one with 350 horsepower and torque is intended to be as hardcore as possible. The suspension is way too hard for most street driving. It has a lot of power, a lot of personality. This is just at a 10 all the time and screaming.
I forgot how much power this car makes. 350 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque out of a 2.3 liter turbocharged 4.
This one has the fastest 0 to 60, running about 4.5 seconds in some cases, whereas the others are running closer to 5.
What's interesting about the engine is that you're above 5,000 RPM, somewhere in there. It sounds like you're at about 3. It's very distant. It's muted in a weird way.
When it was first sold, this car gained a reputation as being unreliable because some of the engines on the very early run had been built incorrectly with the wrong gasket. But here's one with 100,000 miles still running great. In fact, this thing feels really new, and it isn't at all.
I've always thought the focus shifter was a little bit too far to the right. You can see actually the drive mode buttons are between the driver and the gear shift knob here. I want this to be lined up closer to me, whereas on the Corolla, it feels a little bit better.
The shifter in this is longer throws and not quite as satisfying as the one in that Corolla, but of course, that's better than the Kona, which doesn't even offer a manual, so pick your poison there.
It is a hatchback. It's exactly what this is. It's just in a different category, so you're cool again, right? No more hatchbacks. That's so yesterday's news. But it isn't nearly as hardcore as the other two.
The Veloster always punched well above its weight, especially in price, and this is almost the exact same horsepower and weight and size and performance as the other two cars. This has a 0 to 60 of less than 5 seconds. It weighs right between the other two cars at about 3,300 pounds.
It feels like the Tasmanian devil of the bunch. It feels like it could just bite you at any moment.
So it's the same 2-liter turbo engine that we found in the Veloster N. 286 horsepower, 289 pound-feet of torque. That is actually more horsepower and torque than it had when it was in the Veloster N, and that comes down to overboost.
You notice the steering wheel. It's got 2 giant N buttons, which means you can customize what you want the car to do, and that's been the hallmark of N version cars. You can change so many things to tailor it to what you're doing. And then there's a bright red button down here.
It is the NGS button, the N Grin Shift. You feel better? You feel special? Yeah, that's your overboost. You hit that, so there it goes.
Okay, we've found the torque now. It feels like it's given me the power the other two cars do. And that's it for now.
In, grin, shift, that's really, you couldn't have just said overboost? Or extra or surprise would have been fine.
Not gonna scream, not gonna shift.
In, grin, shift. Okay.
And it's quick. But the issue here is, it's not offered with all-wheel drive.
Everyday Driver is brought to you by Covercraft. Use the code EVERYDAY22 for 10% off your order.
I like this experience better when it was the Veloster N. I like this kind of performance better when I'm sitting lower to the ground, not this very abrupt school bus, I'm hooning a Vanagon. That's what this feels like.
It just hesitates when you chuck it into a corner in a way the other two cars don't do. It's almost there. And I like that we have this as comparison because this is the hatchback equivalent for Hyundai. It's not as hardcore, even though you can feel people from motorsports developed this. They wanted their little SUV to do things it shouldn't. And they achieved their goal.
The handling of the Kona is very front-wheel drive. You can tell it's doing a lot of pulling up front, and the back's kind of hanging on for dear life. You can drive the other two and wonder if you need all-wheel drive. You drive this, and you know that you do. This Kona N is like fun with body roll, and it is genuinely fun, but there's a lot of body roll because it's tipsy, because it's jacked up on its suspension.
It's a snorty little beast. It's so agitated, and I like that nature of the car, but it's almost ill-suited to a tall SUV like this, even though it's just a tall hatchback.
This is juvenile in a fantastic way. It doesn't have a sophisticated ride. It doesn't have a sophisticated feel. It feels like a teenager. It feels like a teenager who just discovered espresso. This has a few settings. One is normal. One is sport. What it needs is one that's calmed down. It needs a calm down setting because this ride is jittery. The extra ride height that you have to make it a CUV means that it's just kind of buzzy and up on its toes. Now that can be really fun, but it also can be quite bumpy.
It sits too high. For the amount of performance and the twitchy turbocharged nature of it, it's a little too much. I want this car to be lower on its suspension.
This one you sit even lower than you do in the Corolla. This definitely has a sit on the floorboard sensation in a hatchback. This is the exact opposite of that Kona as far as sitting deep in the cabin. Ford threw all the trickery possible at this. Yes, it's all-wheel drive, but you can change what the power is doing. In fact, there's even a drift mode. Drift mode on this car was always a little bit strange because, of course, this is a front-wheel drive chassis masquerading as a driftmobile. This has more of an all the power, all the time to all the wheels feel than the Corolla.
It's still very relevant. It seems like such an old news kind of a car, but the driving dynamics are hard to beat. Oh, little squeal, little screech, I like that. Yeah, you just want to go find the limits. I still feel like I'm piloting a heavier car, just a more beefy car, and I want something really nimble and light.
This electric steering rack actually feels more analog than the one in the Corolla. I'm talking about slight amounts here, but this has an incredible dive off center. There's no slack in this steering rack whatsoever, and the wheel takes more effort and has more feel of the drivetrain. Even with 100,000 miles on it, the tiniest bit of turn in, and this car is tracking with you, and there's very little body roll. Now, the downside to very little body roll and a very abrupt steering is that this rides terribly. It just rides way too rough for most conditions. Now, if you're on a racetrack, you're probably going to be pretty happy with it. I am not on a racetrack, any imperfection in the road, and I'm kind of hating myself. And I even have the suspension set on the softer setting. I can set it on the harder setting with the end of the stalk, and then it's just a comedy routine.
The all-wheel drive on this car is sort of like the GR Corolla, where it distances you from the driving experience. But I do like the Focus RS handling better. I like how this turns in. It seems lighter, more delicate, more information. The Corolla feels more distant.
I think almost every GR Corolla owner is going to pick a different setting for which drive wheels get how much power, and they're going to pick it for very personal reasons. When it's at 60/40, you can feel the front half of the car is just a little bit in charge. It's like they have 51% of the say in the marriage. When you have the 70/30 on, you can put the power to it on the back of a corner, and it wants to rotate a little bit like a rear-wheel drive. It doesn't do it fully, but you can feel that the power is going more to the rear wheels and doesn't create as much scrub as you would normally get in a front-wheel drive bias car.
As precise and interesting as this is, it's still a little bit muted by the all-wheel drive system. But I'm willing to take that as a trade-off, because you think you've come into a corner too fast, and you haven't. I'm not saying this defies physics, but the solve is to add power. See, you chuck it into a corner, roll back onto the throttle, add power, and let the car think. It's so much fun.
This has a more compliant ride than the Focus RS, but yet it doesn't feel sloppy or have weird dive like I find in the Kona. This really is a great middle ground. Yeah, there's a little bit more body roll than I personally like, but I do find the Focus RS to be way too aggressive.
The only problem driving this on the street is you're just going to see red mist. There isn't a chance you can get in this car and drive normally. You're going to pass everyone. You're going to out-corner practically everyone. This is a car that I need, though. This is part of a perfect garage.
You know when you're a kid and you wish for that breakfast cereal that was just marshmallows? This is kind of that. I mean, there's a few little random pieces thrown in that you'll just chuck out, and they're not the best. But in general, it was good that you waited for the box of marshmallows, so pass the milk. This is where we are.
Yes, the car is as good as the stats say. As a matter of fact, I think it's even better.
Everyday Driver is brought to you by Griot's Garage. Use the code EDRIVER for 10% off your order.
I really like the Kona N. I really like N designation Hyundais, but this is not the one that I want. It works for some people, and that is excellent, and I still want a low-to-the-ground little hatchback.
Driving the Kona N makes me wonder if we're going to look back on this era of cars and wonder why CUVs were all we made.
I want Hyundai to embrace the hatchback nature of this, because that's what it is. Let's stop calling it SUVs and CUVs, and let's have a little hatchback to compete.
Hyundai's made something really cool with the Kona N. I like how playful it is. I like driving it. I just wish it wasn't trying to be a CUV. This should just be a hatchback. I liked this better when it was called the Veloster N.
Even though this still looks interesting, you have to be a real enthusiast to really notice or care about the Focus RS anymore.
If this is one bookend and the Golf R is the other bookend, the GR Corolla falls 3/4 of the way toward this.
But the driving dynamics on the Focus RS, Ford built them to be so good with motorsports breeding that it's still valid, it's still right.
Driving this again, I realize it's every bit as good as I remember it and every bit as stiffly sprung. But it's disappointing because I wish Ford still sold this car. And then I look over and realize the Corolla is the latest and greatest version of this exact idea, almost this exact execution.
I can't believe this car exists. And it's placed Toyota in a different category, a different headspace. Look at all these GR cars that they're building now. Toyota's got sports cars and fun cars and track cars galore, whereas other companies have almost abandoned that kind of thinking. And that's a bummer. And I think that will only bode well for Toyota.
Toyota has actually said they're not going to make a ton of these, and that's too bad. I think it's a missed opportunity. This is a car they should make as many as people will line up with money in hand.
The GR Corolla is built in the same factory as the Lexus LFA. It's hand-built. It feels very different when you're driving it. It's not like Toyota took a normal Corolla hatchback and screwed things to it. It feels like a body shell on a race car.
I hate to say this because when I do, it's going to add to the people that want to mark up these cars beyond MSRP. Don't do that. The problem is, this is worth the hype. It's not as good as all the hype, but in this market segment, I think this is the one you want.